Hey, friends. Hope the morning's treating you well. Good morning to you. I got my coffee. I hope you got yours. I'm back inside the house today. It's way cold out. I mean, really cold. And January came to visit, so I decided I would stay in. I'm up here in my art room, and hopefully I get to go outside next week. I like doing these outdoors, but it's nice to be warm also. Had a little bit of a crazy week. Had a lot of people die this week, famous folks. I just heard that Meatloaf passed away, and it just kind of took me back to the first time you heard those songs. Like it felt like some of those were early music videos also. Meatloaf. I'm gonna be honest, I was never like a huge fan of Meatloaf, but man, the guy's really, really talented. And he sold a ton of records. That Bad Out of Hell album was just a ridiculous amount of records to sell. And I remember he was one of those people who was supposed to be the next Springsteen, the next Bruce Springsteen, but he kind of had all the bombast of the E Street Band and all of that. But man, talk about a guy that, and then he kind of went away for a while. My earliest memories of Meatloaf, take some coffee. My earliest memories was, I think, on Midnight Special, or maybe it was Don Kirshner's rock concert. They would play those videos. I remember that, and I thought that was pretty cool. I thought Paradise by Dashboard Light, when I was a kid, I thought that was cool. And then 2 out of 3 ain't bad. And then a couple years later, I'm thinking 1982 or 83, I was just a teenager. And maybe you had this in your area, but we had this thing called midnight movies. And down in Greenwood, Indiana, I'd live out in rural Indiana, so we'd come into the big town of Greenwood. And every Friday or Saturday night, I don't remember which it was, they would play some kind of a rock and roll themed movie at midnight. So we'd go in there and see The Song Remains the Same, see Let There Be Rock. Trying to think of some of the stuff. Was The Wall out then? Um, Lots of, that kind of thing. And they always, maybe they did that on one night, and on the other night, every week they ran the Rocky Horror Picture Show on, I'm thinking Friday night was the midnight movies, and then on Saturday at midnight they would show the Rocky Horror Picture Show. And I went to see that probably 5 or 8 times, and probably on consecutive weeks. And it was neat to go to those midnight movies because as a kid, just a teenager, there's no internet, and there just weren't a lot of people that I felt like me. And if you go to that at midnight on a weekend, the kids that would show up, or the grown-ups that would show up even, it was mostly teenagers though, were a little more like me. We probably didn't fit in. And sit through The Song Remains the Same, or Let There Be Rock. And then, me and my buddies started going to to see the Rocky Horror Picture Show. There was also, it was the first time I was ever around a lot of gay people in a setting. I didn't really realize it at first. I just remember people seemed different. They seemed mellower, and I enjoyed being around them. And as a kid coming up in rural Indiana, the Rocky Horror Picture Show attracted a lot of different kind of people. And I've never understood, maybe you guys know this. I bet you, tell me down below if you've had like the midnight movies and the Rocky Horror Picture Show playing where you grew up, back when. If you used to go to that, I bet you we all have a shared experience there. And it couldn't have happened just there. But I don't understand how anybody who's seen the Rocky Horror Picture Show, and Meatloaf is in it, is why I'm talking about this. There was all of this choreography between the audience and the movie throughout the whole thing, where I remember they bring out a big serving plate and it's dinner, and they take the cover off the thing and there's Meatloaf's head, inside the dish, and the audience yells, "Oh no, Meatloaf again!" Everybody yells it at the same time. The entire movie is that audience participation where the audience shouts the exact same line, at the exact same point in the movie. How did that start? I'd never even thought about Googling how that started, but in every town in America, every city in America, kids got together and shouted the exact same things at the exact same time to the Rocky Horror Picture Show with no internet to tell them to do that. And this was all subculture. How did this spread? Did it spread in zines? Did people go from town to town teaching people what to chant at the movie? I don't know. I've never thought to Google that. When I get off here, I'm going to Google that. I bet you guys are Googling it already. But there has to be an interesting history of that out there. Maybe somebody's made a documentary or something. But when I heard about Meatloaf passing away, it brought back a lot of really fun memories of just being a kid, all wide-eyed and, being around people that I felt like I fit in with and enjoying this silly, stupid, campy movie. I saw Rocky Horror maybe 15 years ago, like much later, and it didn't age well for me. I didn't really enjoy it near as much as I did back then. But never let go of how stuff made you feel when you were a kid. But also, Ralph Emery died a few days ago, and Ralph Emery. I remember watching him on television was it the Nashville network, and just I'm not saying I enjoyed loved. Oh God, I don't want to be disrespectful. I never loved him, but I always enjoyed the package of the whole thing. They would rerun a lot of those shows when we first moved to Nashville, and they would show the Crook and Chase shows and stuff like that. And I remember watching, and I really enjoyed it because the musical guests were pretty damn great. And I would see friends of mine in the band playing with whoever, and I'd be like, "Oh, that's such and such from across town. Wow, that's what they were doing back then." And I always enjoyed that. It was the show was always pretty. I guess it's pretty low budget and cornball humor, and not such great cornball humor to be hee haw, or something like that. But it's just not. I don't know, not the best. But Ralph Emery, when I before I get into this, I will say that watching those shows in Nashville, Crook and Chase or whatever, I would watch it and I'd see like the sounds that people were playing. All these guitars always had real heavy like chorus on it. It sounded terrible. That whole '80s thing that I just completely ignored most everything from country music in the '80s, kind of on in a lot of ways, but there's a lot of great stuff, but it would be recorded in ways that I didn't enjoy. So I'd be watching this, and you see the way people are dressed, especially in Nashville. Um, it was just like, oh man, the '80s were so terrible. Is what I'd sit there and think. This would happen every other day. I'd be watching the show and be, oh, the '80s were so terrible. I can't believe this. And then when they would go to roll the credits, they would show in the credits the year that this thing was taped. And while I'm making fun of how bad the '80s were, this thing would be taped in 1997. And it's just kind of like, okay, Nashville lagged behind so much that that's probably why they overcompensate for quite a while now, trying to just be as trendy as possible and over manicured as possible or whatever. That's a whole other thing. Ralph Emery, if you guys know the story about the Byrds playing the Grand Ole Opry, with the Sweetheart of the Rodeo tour, they went on the Opry and they just really did not go over well. The audience wanted nothing to do with them. And it's Graham Parsons. They were supposed to play a Merle Haggard song, and Graham decided at the last minute that he wanted to play Hickory Wind, so they changed the song. That pissed off the Opry, and it just did not go well. Well, afterwards, I don't know if it was the same night or like the next day, Ralph Emery um, interviewed him for his radio show, and it didn't go well at all. Or he didn't want anything to do with them, and I'm sure they probably said some things back to him, and it just did not go well. After that, I think it was Graham and Roger McGuinn wrote "Drugstore Truck Driving Man" about Ralph Emery, and it's kind of a let's get back at him sort of thing or whatever. Supposedly, Ralph Emery had a Sweetheart of the Rodeo album cover on his door of his office, supposedly, and he wrote underneath it, "This is not country music," and so he just didn't like them at all. So there's an interview online where Ralph Emery had Roger McGuinn on his TV show, and I believe it was Vern Gosdin and Roger McGuinn come on, and they play "Turn, Turn, Turn," which Vern Gosdin had just recorded it. They come on, Roger McGuinn sits down, and the interview part starts, and I have to say, supposedly this is the first time they'd seen each other since then, and Ralph Emery asked him, "Have we met before?" And he says, "Yeah, it didn't go so well." And Roger McGuinn really seemed like he was really going out of his way to be nice and to also be honest, just to try to be straight down the middle about it. It shows him in a pretty good light. But he said exactly what he thought, but he was really trying to be nice. And Ralph Emery did not seem like he didn't come across well at all, I didn't think, in this interview. But Ralph Emery's like, "But you guys weren't country music. It was a country music show. You weren't playing country music." And Roger McGuinn just said, "Man, Graham Parsons grew up loving country music, and it was his lifelong dream to play the Grand Ole Opry. And he wanted his mom to see him play the Grand Ole Opry, and that was a big deal." And he said, "We thought we made a country album. We love, Roger McGuinn said, Graham turned me on to country music, and I loved what he turned me on to. And we thought we made a country album. So we thought, why shouldn't we go on a country, show?" It said something to the effect of, "Did you have long hair?" or something like that. And Roger's like, "No, I look like I did now." Anyway, it's an interesting interview. It really is. And then later in life, Roger McGuinn would go back on that same show, and Ralph Emery would ask him, "How's Graham doing?" And Roger McGuinn would say, "Oh, he's still dead, Ralph." And so maybe Ralph didn't even know. But I'm going to put a link down below, maybe in one of the comments or something, so you guys can watch that interview. It's really, really interesting. And I have a feeling it's probably going to start circulating since Ralph Emery passed away or whatever. And heard a lot of stories about him around town. I never ever saw him anywhere. The guy's really is a legend. He's the cat that he had that gig, and it's a pretty damn great gig to have. And I don't know whether he was the best person for the gig or not, but he had it and he did it, and you can't take that away from him. And so speaking of Graham Parsons, a buddy of mine, I've wanted to show you guys this for a few weeks, but a buddy of mine was friends with Graham Parsons. There's Phil Kaufman, Road Mangler Deluxe, and I love Mangler to death. We would have every Sunday for years there in Nashville, a group of us would have dinner with Mangler every Sunday night, and he just tells stories, and it's great. But I went over to his house. Whenever I go back to Nashville, I visit him and go over to his house and sit there and shoot the shit. And I'm talking to him. I went over like 3 or 4 weeks ago, and he's like, "You got to see this. Let's check this out." And he pulls out this bottle, beer bottle, and it says something about. Let me see. It says, Graham Pilsner, a stiff drink for what ails you. Ale is in booze. And he's like, check this out, Otis. And he tells me the story behind it, and I don't remember it. I'm thinking about making a video about this. I need to ask him again. Like, tell me all the details again, because we talked for a long time, and I didn't remember all the details. But those of you who know the story, he was buddies with Graham Parsons, and they made a pact that they didn't want to have like a big. They were at Clarence White's funeral, and it was a big Catholic deal, and it took forever. And him and Graham were like, man, let's never. I don't want any of this, we die. So they made a pact right then that whichever one passed away first, the other one would take their body out to Joshua Tree and burn it in the desert. Graham passed away just a little bit after that, and Mangler went and stole his body from LAX airport, took it out to Joshua Tree and burned it. And Mangler, he got arrested when they came back. They were filming. Who's the actor that was it? Gene Hackman starred in it. It's a really great movie, but they were renting Mangler's house. And when Mangler came back to the house, they were filming the movie in it. So if you rent that movie, it's really, really good. The house Gene Hackman lives in was Mangler's house, and Graham Parsons lived in like a guest house behind it. This is all in Hollywood. Is back behind it, and there's a couple scenes where you can see the front porch and how it's crazy with all this stuff on it. Lots of really interesting stuff that Mangler put up there that was from a lot of different people. Anyway, so he came back and he got arrested while they were filming that, and Gene Hackman said something to the effect of, "It looks like we're filming the wrong movie here," But after he got out of jail, they threw a party, and somebody. An artist, I don't remember the name. These are the details I need to get. Someone got some beer bottles, peeled the labels off, made some. I don't know if this is focusing or not. Made some labels and made this Graham Pilsner. And they made like a case of this stuff. And Mangler gave me one of these bottles. And I figured I'd show that to you guys. I was thinking about making a video about this, just showing it, but I'll show it to you guys right now. Like I said, it says a stiff drink for what ails you. It's Graham. Doesn't really look much like Graham, but it's pretty cool either way. Brutal, November 11th, 1973, Graham Pilsner. So there you go. And Mangler has these great stories, man, about he was in the room when Graham Parsons was showing Keith Richards, just like turning him on to country music. And Keith had the guitar on, and Mangler is at the record player. And Keith, let's see, Graham would say, you need to check out this George Jones song. So Mangler would put a George Jones record on, and Keith would listen to it and kind of like try to pull some guitar licks or whatever out of it and just get a feel for it. He's like, yeah, well, check out Merle Haggard now. So Mangler would put Merle Haggard on the turntable, and Keith would sit there and play along with it, and listen to it and digest it. And supposedly, that was some of the early things of Keith going head first into some hardcore country music. You could hear Russell. I miss Russell. Your Wendell downstairs barking. Hopefully it's not messing up the video. But love Mangler. He's got a lot of great stories. I have intentionally not done anything on this channel with him because there's like another project I've been working on with him secretly for a while that's much grander than this here. But I'm going to pull him into this at some point, and thought you guys might enjoy that. And also, I posted a video. Can you hear Wendell? He's going nuts. Sorry. I posted a video earlier this week of Kevin Harrington talking about tour managing the Rolling Stones. And Kevin's just wonderful, great wonderful guy who I enjoyed being around. He was the Beatles roadie. I posted some stuff a month or two ago about the Beatles, and I thought about not posting that because I was worried. Um, I was worried. His story was pretty much that he was so drunk on the Stones tour that he didn't remember much of it. And I was afraid it's the internet after all, and I didn't want people to just be mean and knuckleheads or whatever. You never know who's going to come out of the woodwork and how it's going to be taken. And I'll be honest, man, you guys were wonderful. You guys were really, really wonderful and grown up about it. And you realize people have their demons, and he realized his right then and went on a different road and got that part of his life, straightened out or whatever. And I don't know, you guys need to pat yourself on the back there, give yourself a little. I underestimated you and I apologize. You guys made me feel very, very good about putting that into the world. So I feel like everybody they understood what was happening there in that video. And it was a very positive thing. And I know there's a lot of folks out there who struggle with substances and things like that. And I hope you guys will get some help, any way that you can. It can be a dark, dark moment here in the middle of a pandemic in January when we get about 5 hours of sunlight a day, it seems like, and we're locked away from people. So I hope you guys take care of yourself, and reach out for some help if you need it. And also the Keith stuff. I have some more Keith stories I need to post. The thing with Kevin that really struck me, I think I said it in the video too. He's the tour manager. He's in charge of making sure everything happens when it's supposed to happen, making sure everybody is where they're supposed to be when they're supposed to be there. He's dealing with all of the details of everything. And he was so drunk that he didn't, remember so much of the stuff. What does that say about the Stones and the condition they were in right then when he's able to keep that job? And it just made me think he must have just blended in with everybody else on that tour. And I don't know. It's a wonder. It's just a wonder that those tours make it home sometimes. But also, I heard that Dallas Fraser passed away this week. And the songwriter, wonderful songwriter, I'd never met him. I don't know that much about him. He's one of those names I'd always heard, but I wanted to bring it up here. The one story I have about him is there's a street in East Nashville that I would pass all the time, drive past it. One day I heard the story that Dallas Fraser was going down Gallatin Avenue, Gallatin Boulevard, Gallatin Street, I forget what the hell it's called, East Nashville. He looks over, he sees a street sign that says Elvira, and he starts humming that to himself. Elvira, my heart's on fire for Elvira. He starts humming that to himself. He's like, that's pretty good. And he writes it down, but he was inspired by seeing that street sign in East Nashville. Now, a friend of mine had a house there in East Nashville on Elvira. And when she went away for a while on vacation, Amy and I watched her cats. So we'd go by every day and take care of the cat and make sure the house was all right. So when I was about to make Souvenirs of a Misspent Youth album I made, I had written all of the songs, but I do a lot of punch ups after the fact where I'll I could make that better, or I could change that, or I need to finish this song, So I was in that stage, like the last stages of doing stuff. So while I was sitting in that house on Elvira, I finished, like Darker Side of Me, Ghost of Our Fathers, and the songs off Souvenirs of a Misspent Youth. I finished and punched them up or whatever in that house on Elvira. So, and then years later, she sold the house. It got torn down, and they put up some big, tall, skinny, whatever thing. That's pretty much how all stories in East Nashville end, it seems like. Well, and then they sold it, and somebody tore down the house and, built some big monstrosity. But that's whenever when I hear that song, I'm always brought back to that street in East Nashville and, you know, sitting in that house and taking care of that cat and all that. But anyway, I hope that things are good with you guys. I have had a little bit of a crazy week, as we all do sometimes. And I'm looking forward to a more mellow week next week. And I hope things go the way you need them to go. And much love to you guys. I'll talk to you soon.